My name is David Ehrlich. I'm the film critic from IndieWire, and it is my great pleasure to introduce David Cronenberg. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you all so much for being here as well. I'm sorry to jump right into the deep end, but it feels like this movie doesn't really have any other end for us to swim in. You said that you almost stopped making films after your wife passed in 2017, and yet since then you've made two, Crimes of the Future and now The Shrouds, both of which focus on death and impermanence and artistic creation in the face of decay. Your wife's death was the loss that threatened to stop you from creating, but it also then became the engine that was driving your creation forward. How did you arrive at that switch? Was it more a process of allowing yourself, or was it more a process of pushing yourself forward?
Well, you say that like I should know.
Right.
Actually, I have no idea. Really, every movie that I've made is personal. You know, some are more obviously personal, and some are more what we call in the medical profession occult, in the meaning of hidden. Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, all I can say is that I felt the need to address, to deal with my wife's death, but I wasn't really looking to make an autobiographical statement. And as soon as you start to write a screenplay, you are creating fiction, and you're creating characters that take on a life of their own. If you're doing it right, they start to push you around. You know, they start to say things you didn't expect them to say. They start to do things you didn't expect them to do, and that's when you know you've created a living thing, and you have at that point a lot of distance between your life and what you're creating. And that's why for a lot of people, the obvious question is doing this cathartic? You know, does it do something? Does it lessen the grief? And the answer is no. It doesn't do any of that. That's all the same.
I mean, you're talking about being hidden, and the word shroud means to cover up or hide, but the shrouds that Karsh creates in the film have the opposite intention, that they reveal something about the deceased and that they're able to see their body as they decompose. But as he's consumed by conspiracy as the film goes on, it does seem like the shrouds start fulfilling their original definition, and that they work to further distract him from the reality of his wife's death. It's almost like a Schrodinger's corpse sort of thing, where she's both right there under the soil of his restaurant, and also gone at the same time. Was that idea of grave tech, of something that was both ingenious and self-defeating, part of what made you so excited about exploring it?
Was I ever so excited? I'm not sure. That's yeah. It's the shrouds. I mean, look, it's conceivable. It's conceivable that there is no body there. For example, I mean, it could be total deception. We don't know from what Karsh is and what he's created. So if you want to go that far, you could go that far. Yeah, I don't know. Have I answered your question? Not really.
Do you think if grave tech were real, and it is, relative to some of the ideas that have been part of the premises of your films, within the realm of possibility, do you think that it's something that people would be interested in, or do you think there would be mass discuss?
Well, I hate to quote a journalist who I was talking to today, but he said he actually did a survey about that. Because people ask me if that technology existed, would I have used it? And my answer was absolutely yes. The technology does exist. I mean, it wouldn't look exactly like my shrouds, which are probably prettier than what you end up with. But the technology using MRI and all kinds of X-rays and other kinds of radiology, you could absolutely, and just cameras and lighting. I mean, this is really the cinema of cemetery, But he did a survey. He said 14 people said no and 11 people said yes. So I thought, wow, you know, so if any of you are interested in the franchise, you have to start with one in your backyard.
You'll be franchising them out before you know it.
Well, it's a fallback career, you know. It's getting really hard to finance movies these days.
Everyone needs a side hustle. I did actually want to ask about the aesthetic beauty of the Shrouds. You know, it's hard not to draw the line from the film being a production of Saint Laurent, it's the production arm of Yves Saint Laurent, and I would have to imagine, or maybe not, that they had some input in what the Shrouds look like. It seems like something that would be in the world of high fashion.
Yeah, no, they didn't.
They didn't, okay.
Saint Laurent, they did invest in the movie. It's a co-production of Saint Laurent co-productions, because the creative head of Saint Laurent in Paris really loves cinema, and he really wants to get involved in the company to get more involved in filmmaking, which they've done with Pedro Almodovar and Abel Ferrara, for example, and Jim Jarmusch. But their strength was really, I mean, in their traditional Saint Laurent costumes, and they have to learn, and they are learning, that making high fashion and working in movies is not the same thing. The clothes don't have to really feel good, they just have to look good, you know, and they have to make them really fast, much faster than they normally do. And at one point they said that they were wanting to dress everybody in the movie, even if it wasn't Saint Laurent fashion, including the extras. And I said, you know, we don't have the budget to dress the extras. We tell them to bring their own clothes, and that's true.
Trying to imagine what Terry's dog grooming outfit would look like by
And
YSL.
that was exactly it. So, you know, there are characters who would never think of wearing high fashion and Saint Laurent. They understood that, but still they thought they could. In any case, the scarf that Honey, the Avatar, wears, that's a Saint Laurent scarf. They really wanted that scarf in them.
Speaking of another company that could have been involved in this film's production, The Shrouds was initially conceived and pitched as a Netflix series, and it's my understanding that like the first episode would end with him in Iceland, and it would be by the end of the second episode that we wind up in Budapest. You know, I love how the conspiracy of the story is so instrumental to how the life that Karsh's grief takes on in its own form, and I love how that open-endedness avoids the sort of catharsis that ends up sullying so many stories about loss and grief. But I am curious what the ongoing adventures of Karsh might have looked like. Did you have an idea of?
Oh, I have notes. I'll sell them to you. That's my next movie. My original pitch to Netflix was that every week we'd be in a different country. That probably what killed it, really. That's very expensive. 10 episodes, 10 countries, it's not cheap. But the idea was that, I mean, burial rituals and practices around the world are extremely interesting and often very, very bizarre, even now, and if you go back to the past, even more so. And it always involves politics, it involves cultural fights and struggles, and money and religion. In each case, he would really have to get into the culture of the country and the burial practices and so on. You get a taste of it with the Icelandic thing in the movie, and so it would have required, you know, would become a huge distraction for him. After all, he is an entrepreneur. He's doing this partly to make money, you know, and he has a restaurant, which I don't have.
It's another side that you could start. One of the things that making the film as you ended up doing allowed you to was to cast it in your own terms, and I know that casting is something that you take very seriously and really invest a lot of your time in and a lot of trust into as well. You've talked a lot about how Vincent Cassel's the degree to which he may or may not resemble you is somewhat accidental, you've said, and we can leave it at that, you know, but I am fascinated by both Diane Kruger's performance in this movie, and also by Guy Pearce's. I'm so curious what it was about Guy Pearce, given his regular screen persona, that you saw as being such a perfect fit for this cucked, angry dweeb. And he plays it so well, but it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I've said many times, casting is really a black art, And it's a part of directing that is, no, I don't know if they teach that in film school, but half of directing is in prep, and part of that is casting. Casting the right actor is more than half the battle. And Diane, for example, was quite shocked that I wasn't doing what is often called the table read, which comes from theater, and it's the idea that actors will sit around a table and read the script together and start to work out the way that they're going to play the roles. And I said, I don't do that. I mean, I don't rehearse. And that's because I understand Woody Allen is the same, and there are other directors who are the same. If you cast it, you want to see what the actor takes out of the script, how the dialogue comes out of their mouths, without my micromanaging it. And then if I think it's wrong for some reason, then you start to work with the actor to change it. But in Diane's case, you know, she was just spot on. I just do one or two takes. I don't do too many. And it's the same. I can't really. I don't think I can articulate why I thought Guy Pearce was right. You try. People talk about chemistry a lot, but of course, if you've not seen the actors together in a room, you can't always anticipate what the chemistry might be or not be. But it is a thing, and so you try to think of who your lead actor is, and once you've got that actor, you start to see how the other actors can coalesce around that actor and to form this wonderful crystal that is your movie.
I mean, you said earlier in this Q&A, you've said before that art isn't therapy for you, that you don't really believe in finding the catharsis in it, that it's more of a sandbox for you to play around in, even if by the end of the process you're still sort of in the same place emotionally. In the process of making the Shrouds, even having that been said, did you discover anything of your own understanding of grief, of death, of decay that you hadn't been able to wrap your head around before, or did you really sort of wind up, sort of feeling exactly as you did?
No, I discovered nothing. I hope you maybe did, but it was for you. I mean, no, I mean there's an Italian psychiatrist came to visit me in Toronto a while ago, and he specializes in writing about cinema from a psychiatrist's point of view. And of course, I had made a movie about Freud and Jung and A Dangerous Method, and he wanted to talk to me. And then he broached the subject of my wife's death, and he said, how are you dealing with the grief? And I said, well, I'm suffering. That's how I'm dealing with it. And he said, oh yeah, well, you don't need any therapy.
So much of the movie does feel like it is, not a satire would be the wrong word, but it's sort of hoisting Karsh on his own petard for trying to avoid having the arrogance to think that he can avoid suffering or mitigate it somehow, that he can conquer it by creating an industry of it, having his restaurant there, bringing his dates, the hinge dates from hell to watch his wife play. Just
so you know. I'll give you her phone number.
It's a good thing you don't own a restaurant, was part of it as beautiful as it is that his wife is gone, but he still sees her everywhere that he goes and everywhere that he looks. I mean, body can be reality, but there's still this other component to it. Is there an element of sort of mocking him for thinking that he can get beyond this feeling?
Yeah, I wouldn't say mocking, because I have more affection for him than that, but yes, definitely. I mean, he is a high-tech guy, he's an entrepreneur, and so his creativity comes from technology, and so he goes to technology to deal with his grief, as I, in a different way, deal with, go to cinema to deal with mine. And but it's interesting. I was just in London, where a group called the London Soundtrack, I forget what the last word is. They spent a week honoring Howard Shore in London for all his music, not just mine. But I went there for that, and they had the London Philharmonic actually playing live to picture for many of his movies. how, for us, music is not used the way it often is, which is to emphasize what's already there. So you have a scary scene, you have scary music. You have an action scene, you have action music, and so on. And we always thought, right from the beginning of our work together in Toronto, half a century ago, that music could do something else, that it could be, to add an element, it could almost be another character in a scene. And one of the things that's there is, in this movie, for me, is that the music is Howard's anguish, his grief, his sorrow, his sadness, his melancholy. So he's rather cocky, and he's rather felt that he's got some distance on his anguish, but the music is saying, not really. And so I think that mitigates the satirical aspect of it, the music does.
Yeah, and it feels to me like, to whatever degree you're having some fun with the characters suffering and the wild goose chase that he's led on, that it does end in a fundamentally hopeful place in that his grief hasn't dissipated and that it's still such an active part of his life. I mean, this is a unique movie about grief in that respect, and that it's because the grief is still intact that it's so hopeful.
Yeah, and I wanted to avoid the sort of traditional flashbacks, of when they met and when they had that great spa treatment in Switzerland together, and so we only really see Becca in her agony, because that's how he starts, when he's letting himself go in sleep and dreaming and reverie. That's how she comes to him. It's not in the moments of joy and happiness, even though, of course, that's what he's missing, but the moments when she was really being dismantled by the medical profession, and how he had to deal with that.
But then, of course, you cruelly, but also tantalizingly, introduce this idea that Becca's body, or some version of it, still exists in the form of her twin sister, who is been an object of fascination for Karsh, but not an obsession. Which, there's a version of this movie that goes down a vertigo-like path where it's all he can think about, but it ends up, she ends up being for him just another sort of point in the triangulation of, where he is relative to his feelings about his wife, along with some of the other characters and even this AI that he has. What do you make of the fact that he does, they have this incredible sex scene, which is so freighted with conspiracy and history, and he sort of moves on from that, and she is the one who is, if anything, more sort of galvanized by the experience because the conspiracy turns her on. Where did that dynamic come from?
I thought you were going to tell me, you were so articulate.
Not at all.
Conspiracy in the movie is basically, the death of someone close to you is actually impossible. You say to yourself, this cannot be true, this can't happen, and it's also meaningless. Why? There's no meaning to it. Why did it happen? It just happened randomly. That's unacceptable. It's very hard to accept that. So one strange way, you would call it a grief strategy, to give meaning to the death of somebody close to you, especially if they're dying young, relatively young, is through conspiracy. The doctors did it wrong. The doctors didn't give her the right chemotherapy. We should have gone to that other clinic. There's guilt involved in the conspiracy as well, often. Why didn't I see this? Why couldn't I do that? And conspiracy, then, if it goes further and starts to become a sort of cultural, social, political thing, it empowers you. It makes you feel, as all conspiracy theories do, make you feel like you really are seeing things that other people are being fooled about. It's something that lets you know how the world really works, the way other people don't, and so on and so on. So it really has that aspect to it. And because Terry is sort of tapped into that completely, that it becomes a sort of sexual accelerant.
We have time for just one more question, and I did want to go back in a slightly headier direction just to end. It's discussed in the film that Jews don't cremate our dead, that we bury the bodies so that the soul has time to gradually let go of its host. And I was fascinated by Gravetech as sort of an inversion of that process, and that it's giving the living time to sort of gradually let go of the bodies and the souls of their dearly departed. But in literalizing that process, Karsh is sort of replacing the spirituality of it. He's taking the religion and making it technology. And this isn't the first time that one of your films has posited, technology as something with a religious dimension, increasingly so in our world. But I don't know if it's ever been so pronounced as it is in this film before, as a sort of a replacement for religion. And this is an abstract question, but do you think that you found that people will always, whether it's religion or technology, throw their lot in with whatever best allows them to mitigate the fear of death? Is that the driving force?
Well, Christopher Hitchens, a polemicist and political writer, said three interesting words together. He said, "Death causes religion." So, and I think that's absolutely true. It encapsulates it. Every religion offers you a way to avoid the reality of death as the end, as oblivion, as non-existence, because it's really difficult to imagine non-existence for yourself, never mind other people. And every religion offers you a way out of death as the end. So, ironically, it could be, Karsh does mention the religion of high tech. And it is a way. If you look at what Elon Musk is trying to do, it's verging already on the idea of eternal life somehow beyond the earth and out into the stars. It is becoming a religion.
He and Karsh are both obsessed with human waste, but I feel like Karsh knows where to find it.
Yes,
well, a big difference.
Sorry about the Tesla. I've had 3 Teslas, and they're really great cars. And I knew that Karsh, as the kind of geeky, high-tech nerd guy he is, of course I have a Tesla, as of course I do. And I love my Tesla. I have a relationship with my car that has nothing to do with Musk.
Do you have the self-driving?
Oh yes, it's self-driving, and sometimes, believe me, I need that. So that's good.
Well, on that note, I'm afraid we have to end the time here. But thank you all so much for coming on. Thank you.